So many people have suspected that the DNC has had some sort of involvement in the murder of Seth Rich. One of the questions that people ask when looking at this possible connection is how exactly could these people within the DNC get away with this sort of thing, such a widespread cover up and the whole fallout afterward? How exactly would someone get away with a crime such as this? One aspect of this that we've already talked about a little bit is the massive amount of collusion between the media, and some have even suspected that people within the police force are complicit and working with people in the DNC. People have already largely speculated on and talked about pretty thoroughly the connections between the DNC and the DC police. John Podesta is one name that's come up continually. Months ago, John Podesta, in an email released by WikiLeaks, was talking about a suspected leaker within his own party. This has been brought up multiple times, but I think it's important to mention that John Podesta is on record in these WikiLeaks emails saying that he would like to make an example. This is an email written by John Podesta saying, "I'm definitely for making an example of a suspected leaker, whether or not we have any real basis for it." Now, these are supposedly in reference to other leaks that aren't, the timeline doesn't exactly match up with the release of the leaks by Seth Rich. So they're probably not specifically talking about Seth Rich here, but it just shows the motive and the desire by John Podesta to go after these leakers, whether, as he says, they have any basis for it. Combined with some of the other news that we've seen and some of the more bizarre stories, it's made a lot of people question exactly what types of tools and how many people are complicit in this murder, and what sorts of tools does the deep state and others involved have to carry out these sorts of acts. This is a story that I brought up in a video yesterday. I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about it because actually looking at a later article and how this case was apparently resolved, or it was wrapped up in the courts, not convincingly probably to most people once you actually look into it. But this was a story from 2015, late 2015, talking about a fake police force that was connected to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris had been mentioned for a few months in relation again to John Podesta and some of the alleged crimes that John Podesta and others in the DNC have been involved in, but even going all the way back to October of last year, when people started talking about the Pizzagate so-called conspiracy. But there were a lot of real questions raised by people investigating Pizzagate. John Podesta, obviously one of the key names that was brought up, but one of the WikiLeaks emails that was discussed, that was part of these Podesta leaks, that was related to Pizzagate, included Kamala Harris and an apparent a dinner that they were all attending. Kamala Harris, I believe her sister as well, Podesta. I will go to the article after. I believe even James Alefantis was a chef, was the special guest chef at this event. I'll jump back to that event, specific event. I'll give a little bit more detail on that, but that is an important connection, that Podesta is friends with Maya Harris, is connected to Kamala Harris. Who is this person who's right in the middle of this story? One of her aides was involved in this fake police force that they self-admitted that they were driven by, that they claimed that they had ties to the Illuminati and some fraternal Masonic order that they're claiming that they were part of. So this was the original story back in 2015, May of 2015. These people were identifying themselves as part of the Masonic Fraternal Police Department. One of them was an aide of Kamala Harris, who was Attorney General at that time, I believe. She's currently a senator. So there was a meeting with people within the police. Suspicions were eventually raised about these people. Brandon Keel is the name of the aide to Kamala Harris. They were charged with impersonating police officers. They had been introducing themselves to police agencies across the state. This is a notable part of the story that I didn't really touch on in the last video, but I think it could be pretty important that these fake cops were introducing themselves to police agencies across the state. So they obviously expected that they would be finding some kind of, I guess, allies within the police department. You would think that they'd be trying to hide themselves from actual police, unless the police or some people within the police were aware that this sort of thing was going on, these fake police officers. So these people said that they were associated with the Knights Templars. They say go back 3,000 years. Interesting. I don't go too deep into numerology or anything on this channel, but you continually see this number 33 pop up, and I believe the ages of these individuals, it's not in this article, I think it was in a previous article that I brought up, but I think the ages at the time of the arrest, it's quite a coincidence, I guess, that they were 36, 46, and 56 years old. So that, I mean, the 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 6, that the fact that that lines up, they are saying that they have jurisdiction in 33 states in Mexico. I mean, that's a number that's specifically chosen by them, and 33 was on the badge number of one of these people. So it seems like this was important. The symbolism was important to these individuals, at least. It's another notable part of this story. They were eventually arrested for this. So how this ended up playing out, it is mentioned that Keel is connected to this Senator Kamala Harris. What ended up happening with these three people, and this is a big part of the story, I should have mentioned this last video. One of these three people suspiciously died before the actual sentencing, and the aide of Kamala Harris will get into what happened with that individual, but the apparent leader ended up actually passing away. This is an article from April of 2016, months after these people were arrested. But this case against these three people accused of operating the bogus Masonic Fraternal Police Department, a supposedly ancient force that claimed to work in 33 states in Mexico, partly collapsed on Monday when the charges against one defendant were dismissed and the organization's so-called chief suddenly died. Hours after he appeared in a San Fernando courtroom, David Ink Henry, the 47-year-old, by the time of his sentencing, the time that his sentencing should have actually happened, he was the grandmaster, so-called grandmaster of this organization. He died of a pulmonary embolism at Henry Mayo Newhall Memorial Hospital. So he was killed he died supposedly at this hospital. This is the cause of death that was given, but this was right before this court date. Earlier that day, LA County Superior Court Judge Hayden Zaki had granted a motion to dismiss the charges against Brandon Keel. This is the former community affairs staffer with the California Department of Justice, whom authorities said had impersonated a police officer and misused his government-issued ID. The developments drastically altered a case that grabbed headlines when Henry, Keel, and Tanette Hayes were arrested last spring, and left Castleman wondering why the charges had been brought to begin with. So this is why it was dismissed. The case ended up being, quote from police on the case saying, this could have told Mr. Henry and Mrs. Hayes and Mr. Keel, listen, this is not a good idea. Someone might think you are impersonating a police officer. Castleman said, I think police are jealous of anyone who might be perceived as an interloper, pardon the expression, a competitor. I'm not sure what kind of explanation that was, but the case was dismissed. Much of the notoriety derived from Keel's role with Attorney General Kamala D. Harris administration, her administration, as well as the bogus police force's eccentric online presence. They go through their website. It brings up how they were contacting the police, which is again a strange aspect of that story is what sort of reaction were they expecting from the police, unless they thought that they had allies in the actual police that would help, I guess, cover up these fake officers that if they weren't caught, I'm not sure what went wrong here exactly, but they ended up being caught. But that would obviously be a tool for if there were people working for the deep state within the real police force to have unidentified police would obviously have give people with the appearance of authority without any actual accountability to carry out their dirty work, I guess you could say. So they were charged with misdemeanor counts of falsely representing themselves as police officer. Henry was charged with 3 felony counts of perjury. Prosecutors later accused the 3 of perjury and conspiracy to commit perjury by procuring fee-exempt license plates from the State Department of Motor Vehicles. But the charges against Keel gradually were pared down. So this is what happened. A preliminary hearing in January. At that hearing, all but 4 counts against him were dismissed, but LA County Superior Court Judge Monica Bachner let stand the misdemeanor counts of perjury and conspiracy to commit perjury. So those were, she let those stand. In arguing to have the remaining charges dismissed, Keel's lawyer said that detectives had conducted an improper search of his client's personal computer and that evidence found on it should be dropped. Castleman contended that the search warrant used in the probe did not cover Keel's vehicle, a Ford Mustang issued by the state for use by Department of Justice employees. So this vehicle that was searched, which also happened to be issued by the state, this was a state vehicle that was issued to Keel for use by Department of Justice employees. Or his laptop, they're saying they didn't have authority or a warrant to take that. They were found in his car. The attorney said that even if the search of Keel's Mustang was valid, law enforcement could not search the computer since it violated the Fourth Amendment. There was no consent. Castleman said they could have applied for a warrant, but they didn't do that. Deputy District Attorney Brian Chang disagreed, arguing in court papers that Keel did not have a reasonable expectation of privacy in his state-issued vehicle. Chang did not respond to a message seeking comment after the judge dropped charges. So the judge dropped those charges. Keel had been placed on paid leave after he was arrested. The most recent article that I can find on Brandon Keel specifically, Kamala Harris was actually refusing to even officially fire him at the time. Now, she's not even in the same position, so I don't think they're formally working together at this time, but it seemed like it was quite possible at that time, at least, that he would neither be arrested or even fired from his job working under Harris. A Department of Justice spokeswoman confirmed Monday at that time that he was no longer employed there. His attorney said his client was hopeful to move on and is now pursuing graduate studies. So he ended up, I guess, he's no longer employed there. It did take some time for her to, this is a couple months later. But I'm not sure if he was even officially fired. I think Harris officially refused to fire this person even, but as far as I know, they are no longer officially working together. But that was really strange that case was basically dropped, wasn't really followed up on. I mean, that's a really bizarre case, and with those connections back to a rising star, I guess, at the time, in Kamala Harris, who's still highly influential and controversial person. You'd think that they would follow up on that. I mean, that's a really bizarre case. Now, to me, it just points to the possible tools at the disposal of these elites that, we've seen the widespread collusion between the media, the political establishment, non-governmental organizations, even people within individual police departments, it seems, are all taking orders from the powers that be, this same deep state, part of the same political establishment that's been trying to keep control over these sorts of narratives with Seth Rich and Pizzagate and some of these other stories. And it's not, I don't think it's quite so obvious to the average consumer of media, because unfortunately, a lot of these media outlets, the media outlets such as Washington Post and New York Times especially, they don't disclose their own connections back to Podesta and others. I've mentioned in the past, it was proven, it's been talked about pretty widely. Another WikiLeaks email back when Stephen Colbert had his show, The Colbert Report. There is a WikiLeaks email that reveals that John Podesta's staff was actually pretty much writing episodes for Stephen Colbert. There's an email to John Podesta talking from one of his staffers saying, I had Stephen Colbert write this segment, write these 2 segments for you. They just ran these 2 segments that I had them write for you. So he's writing the content for Stephen Colbert's show. In the same email, he says, we're planning your Stephen Colbert appearance. Podesta did end up being interviewed, a complete softball interview on that show. Was recently hired, John Podesta, by the Washington Post. The Washington Post, of course, people have brought up the connection between their owner and the CIA. Their owner has a $600 million contract with the CIA, and they have, again, recently hired John Podesta. And the Washington Post has probably been the most outspoken news outlet trying to discredit this Seth Rich conspiracy without really engaging any of the evidence. They're just sort of screaming fake news and desperately, it seems, trying to discredit this organization. And again, this is another outlet that's taking orders from John Podesta and the DNC and the suspects, really, that they should be investigating. So that collusion between the media, that's just the media and the DNC, I've focused on there, and I spent a lot of time on this channel talking about that, but that's a huge problem that's not really brought up or even acknowledged by the average consumer of media. Even more worrying, or potentially more worrying, is this connection between the same people, Podesta and others within the DNC, and these other organizations which have even more authority, NGO groups that have been suspected or caught engaging in crimes against women and children around the world, that continually are rewarded with new contracts. This is a big problem, and the connections that people aren't aware of, I guess, this is how the deep state and these other people that are part of the political establishment can get away with these sorts of things. So this is a story that's been talked about that relates to what I've been talking about here. It's been reported on already. Some may have heard about this, but this talked about a few weeks ago. Seth Rich, police chief, the DC police chief, hobnobbed with Clinton campaign and DNC officials. Just more on this collusion between the people that should be investigating and the people that should be being investigated. Or these many connections between these people. Some more on this. The police chief who oversaw Seth Rich's unsolved murder case has socialized and been honored alongside key Hillary Clinton advisors and even Rich's own boss at the Democratic National Committee. Rich is widely reported to be the source of WikiLeaks' damning 2016 email release that showed the DNC colluding to hand the nomination to Clinton at the expense of Bernie Sanders. He was gunned down in DC 12 days before WikiLeaks' release. Now, former Metropolitan Police Department Chief Kathy Lanier resigned from her post the month after Rich's murder to accept a position running security for the National Football League. She sits on the Washington Police Foundation board alongside Heather Podesta, the DC power broker who was married to Clinton campaign chief John Podesta's lobbyist brother, Tony. So she's the ex-wife of Tony Podesta, the brother of John Podesta, and she is on the board for this DC Washington Police Foundation. In 2014, Lanny was honored on Elle magazine's list of the 10 most powerful women in Washington, alongside top Hillary Clinton aide Cheryl Mills. Another person who's been widely suspected of being involved in a lot of these crimes that seem like they trace back to the DNC, and Cheryl Mills has worked a lot with the Clinton Foundation. That's another name that there's a lot of suspicion around. Cheryl Mills, who she's a longtime Clinton friend and informal advisor, Neera Tanden. Other honorees included NARAL pro-choice America President Alice Hogue and Obama cabinet officer Penny Pritzker. Lanny posed for a photo spread for the magazine. They have links to the photos of them basically at this event together. Who else was at the dinner? None other than Amy Dacey, the CEO of the Democratic National Committee at the time of Seth Rich's murder, who resigned 1 month after the killing as the DNC was rocked with the scandal. Who else was at the dinner? None other than DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She's obviously come under fire. I don't think I need to expand too much on Debbie Wasserman Schultz being right in the middle of this DNC fraud suit right now. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz is also quite closely connected to Kamala Harris. There's a number of photos with the two of them together as well. So that name Kamala Harris seems to be in the middle of a lot of these connections, but this is just another aspect of this collusion between these different parties. And it's, how could you possibly expect the DC police to do a thorough and proper investigation, which includes the suspects that we're naming, the people that are involved in the DNC, when they're all working together? They're not going to investigate people that are basically their bosses that are paying them, or Debbie Wasserman Schultz is openly threatening police, a police chief over this unrelated case that she's dealing. Well, possibly at least indirectly related case, but again, it's not something that she clearly believes that she's above the law, and is quite confident in her connections within the police force and in other organizations to actual proper investigation into any of this. So that name, Kamala Harris, and her sister Maya Harris do seem to be right in the middle of everything here. I talked a little bit about this article in my last video, or this is just a post from Vote, which links to a number of other articles, but this was a dinner that was talked about a few months ago when people were looking through the Podesta emails. It's an event that happened on April 10th. It included John Podesta, campaign chair, and Maya Harris, sister of Kamala Harris, who's been connected to this fake police force, who is also the senior policy advisor, and as well as special guest chef James Alefantis of Comet Ping Pong, for an evening of pizza and conversation at the home of Tony Podesta. So this was at the Podesta house of Tony Podesta in Washington, D.C. Maddie Beckwith, Ezekiel Emanuel, Terry Learman, Tony Podesta, Chris Petula, and Oscar Ramirez. A number of names people may recognize there. Kamala Harris also, I think I briefly talked about this, and this is probably another lead possibly for a whole other video, but I think it might be worth looking into Kamala Harris's connections to NGO groups that are apparently working to fight human trafficking networks. Unfortunately, one of the aspects of these widespread human trafficking networks, these things continually end up being tied back to Western governments, and way too often we find that these NGO groups that are supposed to be helping these people are actually exploiting them and very often they're actually involved in the very types of crimes that they're over there to prevent to begin with. So any type of charity or NGO group that is involved in human trafficking that is connected to any of these names that people are already suspicious of probably deserve a little bit more attention or some greater scrutiny. Kamala Harris is connected to. She's been called a national leader in the fight against commercial sexual exploitation and human trafficking networks, which victimize and enslave poor and vulnerable women, girls, and boys. From her own website, a Democrat and Attorney General of California, sister is Maya Harris. Joe Biden and Obama support her. So, quote from Kamala Harris saying, I'm excited to stand with Hillary Clinton. She has fought for decades to create opportunities for California families. I have a deep admiration for her. That's a quote from Kamala Harris. The Clinton Foundation is one of these organizations that, on the surface, they say that they go around the world to help children and women, but if you look into their work, and I know they've come under fire for their work in Haiti. They've been accused, and there's a fair amount of evidence that they've spent a lot of their time exploiting the people in Haiti. And I've talked quite a bit on this channel about Laura Silsby, the human trafficking. Laura Silsby is an individual who was caught she worked for an NGO group that was funded by the West, and she was caught trafficking 33 children across the Haitian border. And Bill Clinton stepped in and basically got her 10 associates off the hook, and they faced no punishment. Laura Silsby only faced a couple months for kidnapping over 30 children, and she had a very heavily reduced sentence on the behest of the Clintons. So some real suspicious connections between the Clintons and these NGO groups already, as well as the Clinton Foundation itself. This is another person who runs one of these NGO groups that is connected back to the Clintons. Deserves some further investigation, at least, I think, that aspect of it as well. One final thing, and this may be another lead that deserves its own video potentially, but this is something that was quite a very large controversy some months ago. But Kamala Harris, again, was in the headlines with the Podesta emails. It was revealed that it was in the Podesta emails that she was convinced to go after David Daladin. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but he is the journalist that exposed the baby parts video by Planned Parenthood. Kamala Harris is an advocate for abortion, but this was a video that exposed some pretty disturbing stuff that was happening with Planned Parenthood, and Kamala Harris was very adamant about trying to shut down any kind of investigation into the misconduct happening, some of the really actually disturbing things that were accused and were about to be exposed. Kamala Harris really went after these whistleblowers that were trying to expose what was happening here. I'll jump over to that story specifically, but these people, this is a post on this fake police force that was just kind of resurfaced a few days ago. People are talking about more possible connections between Kamala Harris, Podesta, some of these other crimes within the DNC. And these people speculate that eventually, once we know exactly what happens with the story of Seth Rich, that in the end, the Seth Rich story will include the baby parts trade, election fraud, abuse of power, etc. All these stories tie into at least some extent, but I think that those specific stories could really tied together. And Kamala Harris is a name that doesn't seem to be brought up too much, but really seems like she's in the center of a lot of this, definitely. That controversy at the time, I'm sure a lot of people had heard about it, but Kamala Harris eventually, she investigated this group that was trying to expose Planned Parenthood's baby body parts sales. So this had been alleged that Planned Parenthood offered partial birth abortion procedure details and talked at length about the body parts that are now commodities. Back on July 24th, California Attorney General Kamala Harris announced she will investigate whether the Center for American Progress broke any laws in videotaping Planned Parenthood's Dr. Deborah Nucatola. On the video, the doctor discusses Planned Parenthood's sales of baby livers and the practice of partial birth abortions to supply intact body parts. According to Life News, while Nucatola offered partial birth abortion procedure details and talked at length about the body parts that are now commodities, she brazenly described how the heads of unborn babies killed in abortions command top dollar. The video of Nucatola discussing these things quickly went viral following its July 14th release. Later in July, a number of representatives sent a letter to Harris saying the Center for Medical Progress created a fake limited liability corporation. In advance of the meeting, it recorded with a Planned Parenthood doctor. The video was captured by actors using fake identification to pose as buyers from that fake human biologics company. This elaborate scheme raises serious questions about whether any federal or state laws were violated in securing the LLC or the personal identification that were part of its execution. So that's who Kamala Harris chose to target in this story, were the whistleblowers that recorded it, because they did it they recorded it on the grounds that they were buyers for. I mean, it's just bizarre that is the priority, to target the people that were trying to expose this. After receiving the letter, Harris admitted that she will indeed investigate those who exposed Planned Parenthood's admitted practice of harvesting and distributing the livers, heads, and other body parts of unborn babies. According to the Sacramento Bee, Harris said, "We will carefully review the allegations raised in your letter to determine whether there were any violations of California law." She said her office will also review any materials filed by the Center for Medical Progress with the Attorney General's Registry of Charitable Trusts to determine whether the organization violated laws, including, but not limited to, our registration and reporting requirements. Less from the article, it says, lesson: this is what you get when babies' lives are not adequately revered, but those who commodify their body parts are. So Kamala Harris, I mean, just blatantly trying to protect. I mean, it just seems like a complete and total and a disgusting sort of bias that Harris had. No matter what, people, I don't spend too much time on talking about abortion on this channel. I mean, people are welcome to their views, but this is a really disturbing practice. And the fact that this was the follow-up, that Kamala Harris wants to protect the people that are selling baby parts and punish the people that filmed and tried to expose this, and they ended up being raided because of this. The Center for Medical Progress, based on the demands of Kamala Harris, she went forward with this, and they were raided. It's just an unbelievable. It's an unbelievable story. So that Kamala Harris, is again, that's a name that I think needs to be looked at a little bit more closely in this investigation. those are the main things that I wanted to report on. I'm not sure how long I've been streaming this live video. I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this video. I know some people like having some longer live streams every once in a while to just have a little bit of time to talk in the live chat as well. If you're not watching live, those were basically the things that I wanted to report on. Obviously, I will follow up on all those stories as more evidence comes out. And as I said, I have all those links to the individual articles in the description of this video if you want to check those out. There's a couple stories in there that I think probably deserve a follow-up in their own video. Just look at a couple of your comments before I sign off. People are rightfully angry over the Planned Parenthood story. I just thought I would read through a few comments since we had a few live viewers right now. But yeah, so those were the main articles I wanted to look at. All the article links are in the description of this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone.